Hi, welcome. Good afternoon. Well, today we are going to talk about certified Scrum Developer training. Our guest, Chet Hendrickson. Chet Hendrickson has been involved with Agile software development since '96. When as a member of Chrysler C3 project, he helped develop extreme programming. In 2000, Ron Jeffries and Anderson and Chet, they wrote the Extreme Programming Installed. He details XP core practices and how to do them, and how they work together to help teams to be successful. So, since 2002, Chet has been an independent consultant, coach, and trainer. So, in 2009, he asked Scrum Alliance, and he's supported by the Scrum Alliance to help the developing the certified Scrum Developer program. So Chet and Ron Jeffries taught the first CSD course, and they continue to offer them in the United States and Europe. Chet has been a certified Scrum trainer since 2009. Chet and Ron often work together and are very popular on conference speakers. Usually now, these days, he has coming for the last 3 years for the Scrum Day conference in Portugal. Today, I would like to welcome Chet to be here on this webcast and to explain us all about the CSD, because it was a program he developed. So there are a lot of teachers, a lot of coaches, a lot of trainers, but this has a special flavor because it was Chet and Ron who developed this training for Scrum Alliance. Chet, why should I become a CSD?
The next class will be how to work this equipment that I've only had for 15 years. A moment ago, I believe, why should people take training like a certified Scrum Developer? Well, back when we were creating extreme programming in the late 1990s, we started doing training about under it, and Bob Martin, Ron Jeffries, Kent Beck created a course that they called the XP Immersion course. The CSD we created for Scrum Alliance is really the direct descendant of that training. This all came about because the folks at Scrum Alliance at the time, Ken Schwaber, who was the chairman of the Scrum Alliance at the time, saw the same thing we were seeing in Scrum teams, which is Scrum teams would get to the end of a sprint and they would not be done because they weren't able to get done, or they had a low understanding of how much they'd actually accomplished. That sort of caused the whole loop in Scrum of discovering what our product should be to become crippled. Another thing we saw in Scrum teams is that they would sprint after sprint slow down. Ideally, a team should maintain essentially the same capacity, the same what some folks call velocity throughout the entire project, or maybe even speed up as they learn new things. But we discovered that they slowed down sprint after sprint because the code base that they were building was deteriorating in quality. And the solutions for this are actually found in extreme programming. And so we created CSD to help Scrum teams with one of the major problems we saw, the major problems we saw when it came to the technical side. And so if you're seeing your team not deliver value, not deliver a working increment of product at the end of every sprint, you need to train your developers in order to work in a more iterative XP style. If you find that your development is slowing down sprint after sprint because we're having deterioration of our internals of our product, we need to bring the technical practices in which solve that as well.
Yeah. So, Chet, I have this book here. I think you know him.
I do. Have I frozen? I just see myself there, like in an odd thing there. I'm moving over.
So it says.
So yes, I'm sorry. I'm easily distracted.
So it says here, value starts when we ship software. So the second value of Agile Manifesto is working software over comprehensive documentation. And today what I see is everybody explaining, most of the things I see, it's everybody explaining to the teams, the Scrum Master, the product owner, whatever. But by the end of the sprint, and I'm not talking, let's not go too deep perhaps right now regarding to if it's 1 week sprint, 4 week sprint, 2 week sprint, whatever. But what I see is done, it's not done. Okay, so done, it's not done. And every time they start to ship it, they are really afraid. So they test it 3 times more. So this is what you're talking about?
That is certainly one of the things I'm talking about, yes.
Chet?
And so when you look at extreme programming, yes.
Okay, I couldn't listen to you. Okay,
can you hear me?
Move forward. Yeah, I can hear you very well right now.
Okay. So, okay. It's a long way between here and there.
Yeah, it is.
So please
just need to be a little bit more near to your. So I was saying it value starts when we ship the software. So most of the teams, by the end of the sprint, done is not done. They need to continue to test, and then they have integration tests, and then they have acceptance tests. And then it's not done. And they always talk about the Scrum Master, the product owner, so this is what you're talking about. So the teams they are not able, even with all the Scrum, with all with everything they explain in the intent of the trainings, it's about the team. So CSD is more about the qualities of the engineering practice, about the team, right?
Yes, in the same sort of way that project management and product envisioning changes in a Scrum world, how we actually go about building the product has to change as well. From the end of the very first sprint, we should have a shippable increment of product. If we aren't doing that, then we have to go back and look at what are our technical practices that are keeping us from being able to do that. My wife picks that up. And so we have found that in order to be effective at doing Scrum, you have to do extreme programming technical practices. Everybody from the inventors of Scrum on down have said this. And so CSD is an attempt to bring those things into Scrum. The main things we focus on in CSD are acceptance test driven development, which is the practice of building acceptance tests with your product owner before you start working on the actual feature. This tells us when we're done with that feature. It tells us what we need to do, and it tells us lots about what we don't need to do. We focus on simple design. When you're going to build a product incrementally, you don't have time to go off and build huge amounts of infrastructure, huge amounts of framework at the very beginning, because you have to build a product. And so we have to start with a very simple design that will just support the features we're going to build in the first.
Sorry, I was just saying, so we see the teams going to attend the certified Scrum Master training. Okay, and perhaps some of them later to attend the certified Scrum Product Owner trainer. Okay, and now we have a different roadmap, which means later they need to go to the advanced, and then they will become to the professional. But I don't see so much the teams or even the attendees are not even techies. They attend to the CSM, but they don't move forward to the CSD. And so what you were saying is, so you can understand Scrum, but if you continue delivering the way you are delivering, this will not help you, right? Because if you continue to deliver without incremental, it will not be shippable by the end of the sprint. It will have bugs.
Well, we have a saying. We have a saying over here that if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. And if our developers, the people actually with their hands on the code, don't change how they work, then we will get the same outcomes we've always gotten. It doesn't matter whether we're making them stand next to a whiteboard once a day and interrogate them what they did over what they did. The product will not improve at the rate we need it to. We will either discover that they are building monolithic, hard to maintain product, and the stress of building it with Scrum will cause that to happen much faster, or it actually will just collapse. And so without good technical practice, Scrum will, the power of Scrum will be to show us the massively bad side effects of doing that incredibly quickly. And so without this kind of training, you will get the kind of outcomes that we always get, which is bad crappy code, stuff that's hard to maintain.
Yeah, that's one of the things. We see a lot of teams, they understand pretty well Scrum, they are really advanced, they know exactly what is a product backlog item, they are really fancy right now, really, you know, they use a lot of several techniques to do the sprint planning meetings. They use hugely advanced videos to do the review meeting. The retrospectives are not so much effective because it's about them and about the way they build the software. And that creates a huge amount of effort. And so how the CSD will help them to change that?
Yes. Well, it gives them the basic tools you need to work differently. We're going to teach them how to work together as a team, as opposed to just having individual people go off and work independently. We're going to teach them how to have one integrated code base from the first day you write code all the way to the end, as opposed to having branches that go off for the length of the sprint, and then you fall into what we normally call integration hell at the end of the sprint, where everybody's trying to bring their code together, which may take days at the end of a sprint. What we want instead is to have the code integrated all the time. And in order to have the code integrated all the time, we want to make sure that we can protect ourselves when people integrate every day.
So Ken Hughes says requirements are tests, tests are requirements.
Yes. Yes, and so that's this whole acceptance test driven development idea. You know, when we created user stories back in 1996, when Kent Beck created user stories, one of the three elements of a user story is the confirmation criteria. We built that in. A user story exists once you have acceptance criteria. If you don't have acceptance criteria, you don't have a user story. And so once you have acceptance criteria, you're crazy not to actually turn that into an automated test. And therefore,
you know, in 2009, a guy called Patrick Dubois, he was talking about all these movement that they created about DevOps, and the things they come up is people, since, well, and you already told us, but we continue, we don't have a continuous delivery, a continuous integration, and a continuous deployment. So these are the basis of extreme programming since the very early, right? So this is the basics.
Once on the first XP project, once we got live, and it took us longer to get live than we would do it today, but we were learning how to do it. But once we went live, we were releasing new versions of our product about 3 times a week, working at a 3-week iteration.
20 years later, we're still discussing these issues, right?
That was 1997, 1998. Exactly right. And so if we're always in a state where we're adding value to our product, we know that we're never breaking anything because we have tests to prove that. We know that we're adding new features because we have tests to prove that. And we have customers who are in close contact with us. They will start demanding that we give them the new stuff. And so what we want is a world where our we turn this into a pull system. Our customers are pulling new features through our team into their hands, and as opposed to us pushing features onto them in the middle of the night without their knowledge. We want them pulling features all the way through, and so it doesn't stop with even where often DevOps ends, which is into production, but it actually goes all the way into the hands of the people who are using our product, and finding out what they need from us and getting it into their hands as quickly as we can. And that requires an integrated team with all the skill required to do the work, with knowledge spread across all those team members, and the technology backing that up that allows us to work effectively without building problems.
Teams and companies adopting the framework Scrum, and they use a lot of techniques for value stream mapping, decompositions. But one thing it's really interesting that the stories, the user stories, it comes from the extreme programming, right? Can you tell us the story? Why did you create it? Because I know you were in the room when they created the stories. So why did they create it?
That what people call user stories today, which is something, a requirement's written in some format that's somewhere devised along the way, is not what a user story really is. What a user story was intended to be was imagine we built the best possible version of this product we could build, and we put it into the hands of our customers, in the hands of our users. And then 6 months later, we get them together. We have them sit around a table and tell us all the great things that this product is helping them do, telling us how this product has changed how they work, and write down all those wonderful things that those people are telling us about this product. Write down all those stories that those users are telling us about this product we have built for them. Take those stories, pull them back a year into the past, and then build that. That's what a user story is supposed to be. It's the story that you wish your customer would tell.
And what about estimations? Because I believe Ron Jeffries already forget estimation. That was something, everybody was talking about hours and hours and hours and the effort and how many hours I need to estimate, and people don't shut up. So what is the story all about, the estimation and all that, the poker plan?
Well, I always say that nobody wants an estimate. They want a prediction of future actuals. They want you to tell them what's going to happen into the future, and nobody is good at that. Back when we wrote the Pink XP book, Extreme Programming Installed, we came up and described the process that we had created back at Chrysler in 1996 about estimating and what we called ideal days, which is really what story points have turned into. And I wrote the chapter on how you do that, going through looking at the function, the feature that the product owner wanted, breaking that down into the work that we would have to do, engineering tasks, estimating those engineering tasks in some sort of abstract amount. We call those ideal days. Today, those are called story points. We wrote that book. The book was published, and about 6 months after we wrote the book, a colleague of ours, a guy named Don Wells, who had worked with us at Chrysler and left and gone off to another team down the hall, came by one day and said that he had stopped doing that. That his team was no longer doing anything like that. And we said, well, that's really interesting. What are you doing? He said, what we're doing today is we're just counting how many user stories we get done. And we said, well, that certainly is simpler, but how can that possibly work? Because some user stories are small and some user stories are really big, and then counting them all the same just doesn't seem like it would work. And we had some discussion about the laws of large numbers and the fact that after a little bit that tends to even out and not be a big deal. But he said really the secret to making this work effectively would be to make user stories more or less all the same size. And so what we've adopted since about 2000, it turns out, for 18 years, Ron and I have been using Don's theory that what you want to do is take user stories, break them down so that counting them just works for all your planning purposes. And now we have different theories on how big you're allowed to have a user story. Ron says 2 days. I'm a little slower and I say 3 days. I use 3 days because as a programmer, I know that if I told somebody it would take 3 days to do something, that usually meant I knew what it was I was going to do. If I said some number bigger than 3 days, that'll take about a week. That just meant I was making it up. And so my screen just went dead. So I say 3 days because I believe 3 days when I say 3 days to someone else. Now, that turns out to work incredibly well. If you do that, your ability to plan and estimate a project will actually be more accurate than if you just do story points. And there's research that shows that. Neil Kinnock down in New Zealand, I believe Neil's from either New Zealand or Australia. He's from the other side of the world somewhere. He has come up with even a simpler idea, which is he says, break your user stories down so that it only takes one acceptance test. If you have only one acceptance test, you're never actually doing anything that looks like estimation. You're just building acceptance tests, and therefore one-to-one between acceptance test and a user story, and then count those all the same because you're dealing with one idea, and that's good. And if I want to estimate things that are big and I haven't had time to break them down, I can simply look and see how many acceptance tests it's going to take to cover this big idea, and therefore I know the relative size of that one to my baseline one. And so I can do all that project management kind of activity based on creating acceptance tests, which have way more value than any of that other stuff we're using, because all the things we're coming up for estimates are just silly project management stuff. And you take that and show it to your customers 5 years from now, they still won't know anything. But if you have a product that meets these acceptance tests, I have a product and it does these things. I can prove it what it does. And so the side effect of working that way is I have all these acceptance tests.
The first thing your explanation clarifies a lot of things. But I'm sure if I go to a company in my world and say that, the first word that comes out of their mouths, it will be, you know what? Which words? 2 words they will say. Yes, but. So.
But we have to have, and one has to sometimes drill down a little bit into that and say, okay, what question are we trying to answer with this? And how good have we been answering that question this way over the past few years? Because if we're really good at estimating using whatever technique we have right now, then that technique is probably pretty good, and maybe we should keep doing it. But our history shows us that stuff doesn't seem to work very well, and we want to try something else. Years ago, when we were talking about how do we sell XP to people, which I am the world's worst salesman, and Kent Beck came up with what he's proposed to be our elevator pitch. which was what would you do if every feature you might build cost the same? What would you do? How would you plan your work if everything cost the same? Well, the answer is I'd do the most valuable thing first. Well, maybe we should do that anyway. Maybe we should always do the most valuable thing first. Let's focus on value. And so by taking our backlog items and breaking them down into smaller pieces around value, because acceptance test is really about verifying value delivered, let's break things down around acceptance test, which is a very, very good proxy for value. Then I can look at those and say, which one of these gives me the most value? And since they all cost more or less the same, let's do that one first. And so it gives us a much more rational process for planning our projects, as opposed to building all kinds of stuff. And hopefully at the end, everything will come together and we'll have something that works. Let's have something that gives us the most value possible at the end of the first day, at the end of the first week, at the end of the first sprint. And if you do that, you'll have people banging on your door asking you to give it.
Oh, this is the most valuable thing, right? Being here with Chet Hendrickson, which I would like to thank you again, because most of the Scrum Developer trainings, I know a couple of them, people are just explaining the learning objectives or explaining just the XP practices, but kind of no story, no content. Or they spend more time trying to clarify, to tell and sell what about Scrum as a framework, how they deliver in kind of approach. And you explains all the stories, why this comes up, why did it happen, and what is the reason behind this. And so thank you once again, Chet, to sharing this. Right now we have the feature. Thanks. Sorry? It took an export code. Right now I'm going to share here the picture of the image you have shared with us regarding to the XP practices.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, we call this the XP circle of life. Starting at the inside with the things that developers do, test-driven development, refactoring, which is improving design, simple design, pair programming, working together to increase the knowledge of our team as quickly as possible. The next layer are things that are important to making team work effectively together. So inside is things we as developers can do. The next layer is things that we as a development team do. We have a coding standard that says this is what good code is. It's not just really where the curly braces go. It's what makes code good. We always work in a sustainable pace, meaning that we don't kill ourselves by working huge amounts of time. We work in such a way that we can get to the end of our project and still have a life. We used to call this no overtime. And I still like to think of it as no overtime. Here in the U.S., we were fascinated with working for free for our employers. No overtime, in my head, has always meant not having to be at the office when you don't want to be. And I have had jobs where at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, I was working overtime. And I was lucky enough to fall in with a group of folks at Chrysler where my wife, Sue, had to stop me from going in on Saturday and Sunday and working because we were having so much fun and it would not have been overtime. We have an idea called metaphor, which has kind of fallen away because people never really understood metaphor, which is a story that you can tell about the entire product and its architecture and how it works together so that we create a shared language that we, the technical people and the business people, can use to describe how our product actually works on the inside. We couple that with collective ownership, meaning that anybody on our team is allowed to change anything in the system. There's no code that's owned by a particular person because we have all these tests. Anybody is allowed to change anything and they'll know if they broke anything immediately. once you have that, you can move to continuous integration, which is having one cohesive code base that's always integrated, that's always shippable and always tested. And that's really where DevOps jumps off from. And then we have the outer loop, which is really the same outer loop that mostly Scrum has. We have a planning game, which is the planning process of XP, which is the exact same planning process of Scrum, really. We have small releases, which cause us to work in small loops. We have a whole team, which means we have all the skill needed to build our product, both technical and business, all on the team together, working together. And we back that up with customer tests, which are the tests that our business people, our product owner own, so that we know that we're meeting their needs. So that's the XP practices as we invented them.
Oh yes, definitely they are.
Years ago, and they
still Chet,
are valid today.
Is it possible to develop software bug-free?
Well, the first thing you have to decide if you're going to try to answer that question is, what do you mean by bug? And so having discovered something about what you wish the product would do after you created your requirements, that's learning. And learning is very important. We should never take learning and give it a pejorative name like bug. So having our customer learn something more about what they want is not a bug. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. And so if we start out by having a vision of what we think our product wants to do, knowing that that vision will change as we build our product, because this is a complex system and the product we build will change our vision of what the product wants to be. If we build tests to support that, then our bug rate can drop dramatically. And so the techniques we do in the developer training, the test-driven development, the simple design, the refactoring, the customer tests, adherence to a good coding standard, has project after project reduced bug injection, defect injection by about 2 orders of magnitude. So if you have a team that's creating 100 bugs, you're going to go down to creating 1 or 2 bugs. I have never seen a project that had 0. I have seen projects where they would have 1 every 3 or 4 months. But that is a big change in one's life. I always like to joke that I go places and visit teams where they have so many bugs, they have to have a database to keep them in. And I just imagine how soul crushing that would be, to have so many bugs that I have to have a database to keep them in. And I would prefer to have so few bugs that when one came up, you would feel bad about it, that you would weep that you failed and you let a bug get out. My partner in crime from years ago, Rich Garzaniti, built a very large, complex Java enterprise system that after 16 months after deployment, they had 3 defects reported.
So what?
Every one of them made him mad. Every one of them made him mad.
That's really impressive, in fact.
Failed 3 times.
So what you're saying, in a CSD training, the core things you're going to explain, it's kind of the XP practices and a bug-free, well-designed, where you can develop, instead of projects, you can develop your features and you can test or you can defect repair, fix your defects before they can go into production, right?
You fix defects almost as soon as they're created.
Exactly.
I have a test that tells me not that I have a defect, but that I am not done yet. And that's what we're trying to go to. We're trying, as you point out, we want to go from building features with bugs in them to building solutions that delight our customers. And it turns out that defects have a non-linear impact on our customers' feeling towards us. We've all had the experience of downloading an app for our lovely phones, and you try something and it doesn't work quite right. And this is kind of bad. And you do something else and it's got a little bug in it, and it's kind of like, this is really annoying. And you get the third thing that doesn't work, and this is a piece of crap, and you delete it. And so the rate of dissatisfaction increases at a very non-linear rate. One bug is bad, 3 bugs, this is a piece of crap. And I don't want to put that into the hands of my customers. I want them to never have a defect. In talking to organizations over the years, one of the first questions I always ask is, how frequently do you ship? How frequently do you release? And sometimes they say, we release twice a year, once a year, maybe once a quarter. I'll say, okay, you release twice a year. And so if you ship something and it has a defect in it, it takes 6 months to get that fixed into the hands of your customers. And they go, well, no, if there's a defect, we put out a hot patch. It is just a few weeks. So how frequently you're doing that? Oh, we're doing that, 3 times a month. Oh, so you're not releasing every 6 months. You're releasing every 10 days. Well, how would it be if instead of selling our customer a big package of features that don't work, and then releasing code over the next few months to make the stuff we've already sold them work? How about if we just actually gave them that feature when it actually did work continuously?
Definitely.
And that changes our relationship with our customers. When you say that, people will come back and say, yes, but our customers don't want updates that quickly. And that's mostly because every time we give them an update, we broke something that they already had, and they're afraid of us. These kinds of practices turn that around, so that when we give somebody something, it actually works, and they start demanding us give it stuff faster, as opposed to taking our new releases and sticking them in a desk drawer for a week just to see if we recall it, which I have done on the other end of this. I have had products where when I got a new update, I would age it a week or two.
So for us to be clear, so most of the companies using the framework Scrum, that doesn't mean they are agile, and especially if they don't have continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous deployment. But anyway, all is about the stories, user stories, estimation, but very, very few amounts regarding to the developers' techniques, right? And because they didn't change the way they work, they create defects. And because they don't catch them before they go to production, they are always afraid. So they increase the amount of tests.
Yes.
But then it comes a time that you don't have more time. So they don't do the tests. So all the defects go inside of the system. And then, well, the best agile they can have is call it the framework Scrum, which is nothing to do with this, right? Because Scrum, and according to Jeff, it's based on XP. So this is what you're going to teach them on the Scrum development training, right?
Yes, exactly right.
And you have fun of doing it. Yeah, because without fun, it means we are not going anywhere.
We'll have fun doing
right? So no overtime anymore, and we need to have a lot of fun. So regarding to tests, we have business tests, programmer tests, user tests, user interface tests. How many tests can we do it?
Well, we tried to simplify our lives years ago. And if you look at our little chart there we still have up, you see we have test-driven development, which creates developer tests, and we have customer tests. And so in the XP world, we really talk about 2 kinds of tests: based on who owns them. We have developer tests, which come out of TDD, which are tests that are owned by the development team. And they are there to prove that the code a developer writes does what they expect it to do. It tells other people how to use it and how not to use it, and it protects that code when other changes happen. And then we have customer tests, product owner tests, to use a Scrum term. And those are tests that prove to our business partners, our product owner and their stakeholders, that the product we're building does what they want it to do. And those tests may take the form and be built in multiple platforms. They may cover different sections of our product, but I like to just keep those two ideas and not worry about all those different kinds of words that we all argue about whether this is a unit test or whether it's an integration test. Those questions don't interest me very much. I want to know who this test is serving.
One of the things when we met a couple of years ago, and in one of our talks, you told me, Hugo, today we build the legacy of tomorrow, because some of the companies, you know, a couple of years later they say, well, let's start from the scratch because we don't know where this is going to take us, and these are so many defects, so many issues. So this is always so. And then you start talking about refactoring, and especially because of all this story you told me regarding to legacy. So how does that work in this training?
Yes. Well, first of all, that comes from a guy that worked with us at Chrysler for a little while named Jim Hongs, who would say that we're building tomorrow's legacy systems today, and we want to not do that. We don't want to be building a legacy system. We want to build a system that's going to persist into the future. And so, without regard to what technology we're using, we want to build a system that can be maintained and grow over its time. And so one of the outcomes of working in this technical way is not building a legacy system, but building a system that can be kept fresh and green and soft. My old partner Martin Fowler likes to say that software should be soft. And what happens is when it turns into legacy code, it hardens and you can't change it. So we want our software to be soft. And the secret to keeping our software soft is following some basic rules of what good design is. We teach Kent Beck's 4 rules of design. We look for the 4 rules of design implemented in the code we write in class, and we reflect on that and we review that a great deal of the time. Good design, simple design, according to Kent, is one that runs all the tests. It works, it runs all the tests. It contains no duplication, because duplication is the root of all evil in software. Most of the problems people have is because they have duplication in their code. We want to get rid of that. We want our code to tell the story that we have in our head when we're writing it. We want whatever we're saying in our head to show up in the code. Not just the nuts and bolts, but the actual story we have in our head about why this is happening. We want it to express our ideas. And then we want to do that with the least amount of code as possible. And so we look at that things all the time. If you do that, then you're not going to build a legacy system. Now, lots of us already have legacy systems. And so one of the things we do in this class is address how you deal with that. How do you take a system that is gone hard, that is not sufficiently tested, and how do you rehabilitate that in place? Because doing that will be much, much cheaper and much more expedient than going off and building it again. And because certainly if you use the same systems, the same ideas that cause you to build a legacy system the first time,
you told me that
it just means you're going to build it again.
I think it was with Jim Highsmith, remember if I'm wrong, when you do it refactoring in ThoughtWorks or something like that, or for Eclipse. It was that when the functionality was that. Can you tell us the story, because you have amazing stories, and that's one of the things I think people would love to have a training with you, because know everyone, and besides knowing everyone, you know all this comes up. So for
you know,
for
I'm old. I forget these things. I don't remember that story. I might remember it by the time I get to Lisbon, but I don't remember.
So
but yeah.
Well, you told us a story regarding to refactoring when you were, I think, with Jim Highsmith or something like that, and you were talking about the tools that it comes up with Eclipse and all the things. But well, if you don't remember, that's okay too. So what are the different? What is? You remember that? No,
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that one? Okay. So no worries. Anyway.
No, I don't.
So attending a CSD, it's 3 days of training. What is expected after you do an CSD training?
3 days of training. Well, after you walk out of the XP training, what we're trying to do, among other things, is lower your pain threshold. What happens often, what we see in most developers is that we get immune to what bad is. And so we let it go too long. And so what we want to do is reduce the time between when we do something that isn't good and the time it actually bothers us and motivates us to do something about it. And so we want to cut that down so that as soon as we type in a lot of code that doesn't express what we're trying to say, we go back and we change it. As soon as we start working on something and we don't have a test to show what it's supposed to do, we do that right then. And so mostly we want to reduce the feedback loop that we have in software development from the time when we start building a legacy system, one line at a time, to actually going back and fixing it so that it isn't a legacy system at the end of the day, at the end of the hour, at the end of the 10 minutes. And so we want that to be really the main focus. We want to give you reduce the pain threshold, shorten that feedback loop, in addition to giving you the skills to do something about it. Because knowing that something's bad is good, but you still have to know what to do about it. And so the class is really about two things. It's skill to fix the problem, and the skill and the awareness to realize when you are creating that problem, because that's where these problems come from.
So this is not a simple training. It's pretty much more than that. So I believe, and I was writing here, so by this training, we value the product speed, we value the rapid progress, and with you, with a lot of humor, we value the people's happiness. So this is something that was also read with, right? This is something we want people to lots of fun. So it
ought to be lots of fun. You think about why you become a software developer. You know, it's because it's loads of fun to take and make this machine do stuff, to adapt to your will, to take it and crush it under your intellect. And this is a class that lets us revisit that joy we had when we first wrote that little program in Pascal or Basic or whatever it was we wrote in when we first started doing this, and having the joy back into this again. XP, when Kent created XP, he said our purpose was to make the world safe for programmers again. And that's really our goal, is to make the world safe for programmers, that we're not crushed by what we call dark scrum, that we're able to say what we're going to do and do it so that we can do it again next time and do it again next time, and mostly be given the autonomy to do the things we need. Joy in work, they say, comes from autonomy, purpose, and mastery. And this course is about mastery, which allowed us to work with autonomy, and then having the skill to align with the purpose of our organization. And so it builds on what it takes to be happy in your job every day. We have way too many really good developers dropping out of software development, either moving into management kind of stuff or going off and doing other things because they've lost the joy of doing it. And this class,
yeah, I agree,
really about
and I believe because I already seen you in action. Well,
I wouldn't do
Chet,
it.
let's see if someone have any questions. They wanna people. Right now we have 27 participants. If there is anyone that would like to do any questions to Chet about the CSD program or the CSD training, when it's going to happen, it will be here in Lisbon. We also have an edition in Porto in the first quarter of the year, so it will be in January, something like that. Then we'll have back to the second semester. It will be on by November or something. Of course, by demand, close training or whatever it needed, we can also do it. This is a 3-day training, a certified training. We also have a next extreme programming training just about the practice and about test-driven development, pair programming, design improvement, continuous integration. So we can also deliver that by on demand. And
Yes, that's a shorter class.
yeah, right.
Without the certification, but focusing on the heart of XP. That's a valuable thing because we find that lots of companies are uncomfortable sending their developers out for 3 or 4 days, so we can get something down that has almost the entire same value but compressed into a shorter time period. It's going to be a different class with a different way of handling the learning, more compressed into 2 days, which I think will be more valuable just because we're putting
guys,
90%
if you want to
what you get into
if you want to code with Chet, so that's the opportunity. So one of the co-creators, one of the most impressive people regarding to this, yeah. It's so
I have a ward number of 1. You guys know what a ward number? You know what a ward number is?
Mm-hmm.
There's this concept in software development called the Ward number, WARD, named for Ward Cunningham, who is really the godfather of agile software development. He's the guy who invented the wiki, among other things. And so if you code with Ward, you have a Ward number of 1. I've actually written software with Ward Cunningham. And so if you come and write software with me, you'll have a Ward number of 2, which is I wrote code with somebody who's written code with Ward.
So this
is a way to get your Word number up to 2.
There was a funny story. Also, you told me you share always great stories, and this is amazing because if we don't forget it, that's a good way for us to keep the things on. Okay, and this is the way Chet teach the classes. So always with stories, real stories, how most of the things they were built, why the things it happens, why is this way. So he always knows the story exactly why it happened, not just bullshit like, this is because I want it, or because this is the framework, or because whatever. So I believe I'm really happy. So you come to Portugal first to deliver these trainings, and later again to Scrum Day Portugal, which will change its name because it's pretty much bigger than right now Scrum in Portugal. And you'll be the share. You'll be the president of the council for the Experience Agile. That's the name of the next year event. So we are thrilled for your arrival, and well, thank you so much, Chet. I think we'll have a question here. I believe I'm waiting just to see it there. And so, anything else you want to share with us right now?
Yeah.
You'd like to enlighten us regarding to the Scrum Developer training, or
the only thing I was going to share with you is
a lot of snow.
View
it's snowing
out my window. I don't know if you can see that or not. Can you see that? Yes. It's snowing like you wouldn't believe here. We have about this much now, and it's going to go to about that much. I was telling Hugo this morning that it was -7 this morning here at my house, and it's probably not much warmer than that. So So please make sure that I can get over to Portugal where it's nice, because it's freezing here where I live. Oh, we have a question here. How can teams always be motivated? Well, motivation comes from joy, comes from happiness, enjoying our work, feeling that our work is meaningful. If we're just doing silly stuff, it's hard to be motivated. If we have control over our lives, we become motivated. If we feel like we know how to do this work, if we know how to do this work, we have lightning crackling from our fingertips when we go work, as it does when I type in my code. We get motivated and we enjoy our work. It's those three things of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Know that we're doing something, that it's fun. Having people around you that get the same kind of joy out of doing the work is really motivating. Knowing that what we're doing has some benefit somewhere that we can understand motivates us. Sometimes those things are very local. Having a team that works together and has turned itself into a family. One of the things that Kent emphasized when we were creating XP was that we didn't want to just be a team. We wanted to be sort of a family. We did things to build a family at work. We ate together quite often because food, as I don't have to tell you folks in Portugal, that food builds community. Food builds community. So one of the rules of XP that did not make it into the official canon is that there must always be food. So we always had food. This is why I look like this. Is we always had food, and it gave you a way of being together. And
Daniel Pink told us it was a company that called Atlassian that everybody used. A lot of people use their software, Jira. By the way, Jira in Portuguese it means beautiful. And the other day I saw the lady from Jira, and she was really beautiful, by the way. So, oh, you see, there it comes the story. That's the best. This is shit I know. So tell us the story.
Jira comes from. Jira is named for Godzilla, because in Japanese, Godzilla's name is Gojira. The guys who built Jira used to use another piece of software called Bugzilla, and so they didn't like it, and so they created their own, and so they named it Jira, and keeping in line with the whole Godzilla. So it's named for Godzilla, the big creature that will come out of the...
For years, I saw the podcast from Bugzilla, For years, I saw the podcast from them. For years. They were really, regarding everything was techie. They just do short podcasts with only what it matters, and it was really amazing, those guys. And these guys, once a quarter, that's what they do. Everybody can go to each other. They have a lot of food, drinks, a lot of fun, and the only thing is what you can come up to, you need to show to the team. So they develop things, they put people talking to each other, and this is how they are so much innovators with all the products they have. And so they come up with once a quarter they get each other, they talk about what would be fun if we can do this and add this feature and all these different things. And in 24 hours, this creates much more features and innovation and new ideas than anyone else in the world. So all this success, it comes from the principles they have in behind it, all this fun and all these, exactly what you're saying, since the 2098 or 89, when you were doing this with Chet or with Kent or with Ron. So this is exactly what we want to share with people here for the CSD, this experience, right? This really, okay. So I think that's all for today. Right now we don't have so many questions. Tony, I hope this answer. So if you build just not the way it is right now, but if you have fun if people cooperate, collaborate, if they share, if they have fun by doing what they are doing, if they understand why they do what they do, I think everything goes well. Now, if you just follow the frameworks, you don't change anything regarding the way you were doing before from the past,
Yep.
well, perhaps if you start with the tools and you don't start with the people first, perhaps nothing will change. But if you start first with the people, and I think everything goes good shape right now. So everything will be okay. So Chet, thank you so much once again. I really appreciate your help by supporting us. I would like to wish.
Thank you. I enjoy doing it.
Well, I will work, and Rumos, everyone will work to make that happen. I think our audience also be motivated, like Tony said, will be motivated to come to attend your training. And I would like to wish you and Sue a very happy Christmas. And we hope 2018 it will be amazing for everyone.
Yes.
Okay, Chet. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
I'm sure it will. Merry Christmas to you all.